the need for emotional control. We are all very rational people. We decide based on cold facts, considering logic, taking so many things into consideration, isn't it? Or is it really true? When we are making big decisions, we do take time off. We consider and reconsider, discuss and come to a conclusion. But during a day, we interact in hundreds of different ways. We, we have video conferences, we have social networking, emails, meetings, so many things. And almost always there is no second time. We interact, we react without much thinking, and it adds up. From the moment we see an event and the moment we start reacting to it, there is a very small time gap in which we decide how we are going to react. You may shrug, you may smile, you may get angry or sad or just ignore it. So many ways. But one common factor is that reaction is more emotional than rational, and it happens hundreds of times every day. Sandeep Patil had said, all shots are played in the mind first, and his emotional makeup, emotional grooming allowed him to see an opportunity when everybody else saw a threat. He was able to master the collar the bowling fast bowlers of Australia much better than anybody else at his time. And not once, not twice, 300 times a day. Think of Boris Becker. When it comes to reacting in an impossible situation, giving your everything, I think you cannot have a better illustrator than Boris Becker. He will throw his everything against any odds at all times. And this we recollect after 30 years of these people retiring, after their peak performance after 3 decades. Why do we remember these people and not others, so many of us? What can we learn from them? Very obviously, they were born with certain additional gifts than a normal man. But that emotional change was groomed over a number of years of training, and it worked not once, twice, but hundreds of times every day. Building that emotional reactions, emotional control takes time and lot of training. I will give you an example from my own life. In 1992, I was placed in Iran. When I first joined the camp, I was very late in the night. It was very late in the night that I joined it. Therefore, I did not meet anybody else except the camp boss. So, early in the morning, in the breakfast hall, I saw others. And I found that there were about 150 occupants, and I was the only Asian amongst them. All the rest were Europeans. I filled up my tray and was looking for a place to sit when suddenly, out of the blue, somebody introduced me to the person I was going to work with, the representative of the management consultant. Instinctively, I sat opposite to him to have chat. Our eyes react much faster than words can ever do, instantaneously. My counterpart was a South African European, and when he saw me sitting opposite to him, at least for a small moment, he could not bear to see a black man sitting opposite to him as his social equal. He was a man of self-discipline and controlled himself, and we had a small chat for a while. and we parted our ways. Working in Iran is not easy. Working in Iran in 1992 was far worse. If anything can go wrong, it definitely did. And therefore, our productivity was very low. Moreover, we all were paid by the hour. We were on reimbursable contract. Therefore, our payments were by the time sheets we filled and not by the productivity we gained. And because of the difficult situation, our productivity was obviously quite low. And therefore, in every weekly meeting and every monthly meeting, my counterpart in the AMC had a lot to talk, and I had to react. Like this, I worked for about a year, and came back to India. I worked in India for about 3 years, and then I got a job in Abu Dhabi. And so I joined that company. To my utmost surprise, and I found that the person whom I was to report to and the person who had selected me was none other than the South African I had met in Iran 4 years back. Gentlemen, when I first met him, he was a man nearing 60. When I met him for the second time, he was quite possibly working on his very last project in life. At that point of time, it was very easy for him to reject my application and ask for an assistant who had a background very similar to his. But even at that late stage in life, he realized that the world was changing and decided to change himself. Gentlemen, after 20 years, in some ways, that man still remains my role model. Thank you. Need for change, need for transparency. Nowadays, no single organization can dictate its terms on the market. We all have to produce what the market demands and sell at a rate which market accepts. Each and every organization has a very small fraction of the total market. Therefore, the need for associations or chambers of commerce has become greater. Only such groups can hope to influence other such groups or have some bargaining power. But to be a member of an association, you have to follow the norms of the association. You have to share information which the organization, the association demands. And they need the penalty for not following these are very heavy. Therefore, each and every member does fill in time, honestly, the information required. And therefore, since your competitors are also members of such associations, your as competitors know a great deal about you. What are the threats you are perceiving? What opportunities you are likely to feel? What are your strengths and your weaknesses? You will yourself be giving such information, and this can be to your advantage, at least in some cases. Just imagine, your organization is not a member of the PBA, Pune Builders Association. You are not sharing much information with PBA. Do you think a customer will come to your office instead of going to a PBA member's office? Very much doubtful. Nevertheless, let us assume that he does. In that case, the customer will have hundreds of doubts about your working. He may not express them, but he will not part with his hard-earned money until his doubts are solved. And for each potential customer, you will have to spend a lot of time to convince. And in spite of all that, such a customer will definitely expect you to sell at far below the market rate than he will be willing to pay to the member. Therefore, sharing information with your competitors can be through councils, members, associations can be to your advantage. The need for secrecy. Now whatever I am going to say is in direct contradiction of what I said just now. Pappu Panwala or Kalyan Bhel or Bankar Dosa, they are charging slightly more than their competitors, isn't it? And there are at least 500 others who offer the same products that these people are offering. And nevertheless, you and me, the final customer, flock to these shops than to the competitors. Why? Very obviously, Pappu Panwala or Bankar Dosa or Kalyan Bhel, they know something that their competitors do not know. And this additional skill set is giving them a tremendous advantage over their competitors. It helps them in two ways. Firstly, they charge little more than the competitors are charging for the same output, same product. And secondly, because so many of us go to them that their overheads get distributed over many units, and therefore again their profit rises. Thus, the value of that differential skill set advantage cannot be overlooked. I will give you an example of 200 years back. Rothschilds are a very big name in finance today. Rothschilds were a very big name in finance 200 years back. In fact, they were financiers to the British government in their war effort at Waterloo. But Rothschilds had also one more thing. To protect their own interests, they had the best spy network in Europe, and everybody else knew it. People knew that if somebody has inside information, it is Nathan Rothschild in London. If Nathan Rothschild doesn't know it, it is not worth knowing. Therefore, the competitors watched Nathan Rothschild very, very closely all the while. Nathan Rothschild's spy network was very active at the Battle of Waterloo, and it worked very well. They were able to transmit to Nathan Rothschild the result of the battle much earlier than others. The whole Europe was watching Waterloo. If the British won, their shares were to skyrocket. If the British failed, they were doomed. Therefore, when Nathan Rothschild got the information, he used it very, very judiciously. Early in the morning, he started selling in small denominations. But the others were not fools. They also recognized that Rothschild is selling and also started selling. Very soon, Rothschild also started selling in big numbers and the shares market crashed. So much so that shares were selling at 5% of their value of the previous day. And at that point of time, suddenly Rothschild started buying anything and everything. He bought everything that was available without letting others recognize it. It is said, and very soon the victory at Waterloo came, the share prices skyrocketed. It is said that Rothschild wealth total